used to think betrayal would feel sharp, immediate, like a slap across the face or a sudden drop in an elevator. But when I found out what my parents had done, it didn't feel sharp at all. It felt quiet, like the sound of a door softly clicking shut behind you and you realizing you're on the wrong side. Let me set the scene. It was early spring in Vancouver, that strange season when cherry blossoms bloom like soft confetti, even though the air still bites your skin. I was home alone. Well, my home, technically. A sleek, modern waterfront house in West Point gray. Steel beams, floor-to-ceiling glass, heated stone floors. The kind of place that looks like it belongs on the cover of an architecture magazine. And for a few years, it had felt like mine. We'd bought it, my parents and I, 6 years ago, after my divorce. Back then, I was bruised and broke, but not beaten. I'd walked away from a controlling marriage with my name, my degrees, and a respectable savings account I'd built from consulting in the tech sector. I had always been the numbers person, the planner, the responsible one. I made smart decisions, clean credit, 6 figures in my brokerage account, and another 3 sitting in high-interest savings. I didn't splurge. I didn't gamble. I did things the right way. So when I said I wanted to invest in a house with them, something multi-generational, something stable, it made sense. I put in $430,000 from the sale of my previous condo and investments. They put in $700,000 from the sale of their old place in Burnaby. It was written into the deed. 3 names, my father, my mother, and me, equal owners, equal rights. That house wasn't just bricks and beams. It was my safety net, my anchor, my seat at the family table. So imagine my confusion when I pulled out the new property tax assessment that week and noticed something off. The envelope was addressed to my parents, not the 3 of us, just them. Then I saw the line, current registered owners, Harold Lee, Maylin Lee. I blinked, refolded the letter, checked again. No Clarissa Lee. I tried to convince myself it was a formatting issue, a typo, something minor. But a small cold voice inside me whispered, check the land title. So I did. I logged on to BC Land Title and Survey Authority that night, paid the fee, downloaded the deed, poured myself a glass of Cabernet just in case, and there it was, in black and white. Title number, CA3921776, registered owners, Harold Lee, 50% interest, Maylin Lee, 50% interest. No mention of me, not even a footnote. I sat in that glass and steel kitchen for what felt like hours, my wine untouched, my hands numb. The silence pressed against my ears like altitude. The next morning, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into their bedroom and demand answers. I made coffee, toasted some sourdough, let them read the paper in peace. And then I asked, Dad, Mom, quick question. Why am I no longer on the deed? My mother looked up first, her brow furrowed like I'd asked her about parking tickets or the recycling schedule. Oh, she said, it's just a little clerical thing. My father folded the newspaper. Tax optimization. Your name was complicating things with your T1 filing. Nothing major. Just for now, my mother added, buttering her toast. We'll add you back later. I don't remember exactly what I said next. Something like, oh, okay. Thanks for explaining. I smiled, nodded, probably even said makes sense. But inside, something fundamental had shifted, like a puzzle piece clicking into place, but not the picture I'd expected. They had done this behind my back, and worse, they thought I was dumb enough to swallow it. Now, for context, my parents aren't villains. Not cartoon ones anyway. They're soft-spoken, well-dressed, beloved in their neighborhood. My dad ran a small chain of hardware stores for 3 decades. My mom volunteered at the community center. People called them solid, wholesome, but they've always had this undercurrent. A quiet belief that I'd never quite know what's best for me, that their way, the traditional way, is safer, smarter, superior. They'd call it guidance. I'd call it control. They used to manage my bank accounts when I was in university. My father would check in on my RRSP allocations. My mother once threw out my rent agreement because she thought the landlord was charging too little and it seemed suspicious. And now? Now they'd quietly erased me from my own home. A $3.2 million property, to be precise. And they expected me to sip my tea and wait to be added back in. But here's the thing. I'm not 21 anymore. I'm 34. I run my own business. I advise tech founders on risk mitigation and capital flow. I speak fluent financial legalese, even if I still eat dinner with them twice a week. So I excused myself from the table, went upstairs, and began to build a folder on my laptop. House transfer, 2025, I named it. Inside, I saved the title search, the land survey, screenshots of the original deed, copies of my e-transfers from 2019 when we split closing costs, emails from our mortgage broker listing all 3 of our names. I even recorded myself talking through what had happened, not for drama, for clarity. If I ever doubted myself later, I wanted to hear my own voice saying, "You are not crazy. This happened, and it matters." The next day, I called Neha Patel. She's my real estate lawyer, smart as hell, wears red lipstick like armor. I met her through a client 3 years ago, and we've stayed in touch ever since. I asked her one simple question. If someone takes your name off a house, is that reversible? There was a pause, then a quiet, clipped response. Depends how you want to play this, Clarissa. Do you want it back, or do you want it gone? And that's when the thought first flickered. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want justice. I just wanted choice, control over something I'd helped build, ownership of my own life. They'd removed my name like I was a footnote. But they forgot something. I'm the one who makes the spreadsheets in this family. I'm the one who signs the checks. And now, I was going to write a whole new chapter. You learn a lot about people when you pretend you don't know what they've done. The week after I found out they'd taken my name off the house, I played my part beautifully. I made breakfast like usual, took out the compost bin, even drove my mother to her book club where she spent the ride talking about how hard it is to find honest housekeepers these days. All the while, my laptop sat at home, open to the listing page I'd started drafting with Neha. The house, after all, was valuable. Very valuable. We'd bought it for $2.1 million 6 years ago. Waterfront view, private dock, a wine cellar we barely used. And now? Neha said we could ask for $3.9 million, and that was her conservative estimate. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked. "Am I sure?" I replied. "Neha, they erased me like I was a smudge on the deed. I think I'm more than ready." She laughed. "Fair enough, but let's do this smart." And we did. We listed it quietly, a private showing only strategy, targeting developers and expats who weren't looking for a fixer-upper, but a statement. The kind of people who buy with cash and don't ask many questions. The offers started rolling in within 3 days. A banker from Singapore, a widow from Shaughnessy, a pair of twin surgeons from Dubai who wanted it as a pied-à-terre for their annual ski vacations. But I couldn't close anything. Not yet. I needed one last piece of the puzzle to fall into place. And that's where the cruise came in. It was early April, which meant my parents' 39th wedding anniversary was approaching. They'd been hinting about a trip for months. Somewhere warm, somewhere luxurious, but hadn't booked anything yet. I decided to speed things along. I left a glossy brochure on the kitchen counter. Mediterranean Splendor, a 14-day ultra-luxury cruise through Santorini, Naples, and the Amalfi Coast. The kind of vacation that comes with a dedicated butler and champagne on tap. My mother saw it first. "This looks divine," she murmured, flipping through the pages. "Imagine waking up in Positano." I smiled sweetly. "You two should go. My treat." They blinked, like I'd spoken in Morse code. "What?" my father said. "You've done so much for me," I lied. And with the business sale going well, I made up a fictional consulting client who'd just gone public. "I can afford it." They protested, of course, said it was too much, that I should be saving for my future. But when I showed them the booking confirmation, first-class flights and all, they folded. And that's the thing. They took my name off the house without asking. But they were fine accepting a $38,000 cruise without hesitation. I dropped them off at the airport on a Thursday morning. My mother wore her travel shawl. My father double-checked his passport 3 times. They kissed my cheeks, told me to water the garden while they were away, and disappeared into security with a wave and a smile. They had no idea I'd already scheduled showings that afternoon. Here's the thing about betrayal. It runs in families, and mine had more cracks than I'd let myself admit. You asked about siblings, so let me tell you about Elaine, my older sister. 2 years older, 3 inches taller, and a lifetime louder. Elaine was the golden child, at least in their eyes, the overachiever, law degree, perfect teeth, Christmas cards with embossed foil lettering. She married a man named Grant, who wears salmon-colored golf shirts and owns a chain of chiropractic clinics in the Okanagan. They live in a 5-bedroom McMansion with a media room, 2 golden doodles, and a nanny who speaks French to their children even though no one else in the house does. We've never been close, not since we were kids, but we did what most siblings do, smiled through birthdays, sent passive-aggressive texts, and pretended to catch up once a year over wine we didn't finish. She didn't live with us, of course, but she was involved, too involved, because as Neha and I combed through the paper trail of the deed transfer, we found something peculiar, an email thread from my father's inbox to Elaine, titled, "Your thoughts?" Inside, he'd forwarded her a draft of the title amendment, the one that removed me. Her response was 1 line, "Cleaner this way. Less risk of dispute later." I stared at that sentence for 20 minutes. Less risk of dispute. I'd lived in that house, renovated the kitchen, paid for the smart thermostat system, let them use my designer discount to refurnish the living room. And now she was weighing in like it was a boardroom deal? Cleaner this way. It all clicked. Elaine had always been better at managing them, at planting ideas, reshaping their thinking. When I wanted to take a gap year, she convinced them to say no. When I started my business, she told them it was too risky. And now? She'd quietly nudged them into erasing me from the one asset that tied me to our family. I wasn't angry. I was incandescent. But I stayed calm. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's notarized. The showings were a dream. The house gleamed. I hired a stager, moved my things into temporary storage, and made sure the fridge was filled with sparkling water and cut fruit like some kind of real estate fantasy. Offers climbed. $4 million. $4.15. $4.30. Neha moved fast. The buyer we chose was discreet and decisive, a newly divorced executive from Toronto who wanted to relocate west and start over. She didn't blink at the price. $4.4 million, all cash. We accepted. And then came the fun part. I called the moving company. I scheduled the utility cancellations. I arranged for all the antique furniture, the heavy walnut pieces my parents had inherited from their parents, to be donated to a local shelter that furnished homes for women escaping domestic violence. I even left a handwritten note in one of the drawers. May this bring comfort where it never did here. And then I waited. 2 weeks later, while they were sipping Aperol spritzes in Santorini, the house closed. Legally, financially, entirely. It was no longer theirs, and not mine either. It was gone. But in its place, I had something better. $1.3 million in profit, after fees, after staging, after taxes, sitting neatly in a trust account under my name, and a plan. You don't realize how fast silence can become noise until the house is empty. No piano, no creaking floors, no muffled voices through closed doors. Just the low hum of the fridge and the ticking of a clock that didn't even belong to me anymore. By the time the deal closed, I'd spent 2 nights sleeping on an air mattress in the guest room. Everything else, my furniture, my art, even my blender, was boxed up and moved to storage. I kept a single suitcase, a bottle of wine, and a folding chair facing the ocean. The day the funds hit my account, I sat in that chair with the wine unopened, staring out at the gray-blue water. The wind was sharp, the kind that cuts through sweaters. It made my eyes water, but I didn't move. I thought I'd feel victorious. I didn't. I felt like I was midair, between one life and the next. But it passed. As all things do, by morning, the final documents were signed. I forwarded Neha the closing confirmations. The buyer would take possession in 5 days. That's when I started cutting cords. First, the movers. They showed up at 9 a.m. sharp, 2 trucks, 4 strong men in blue polos. I gave them exact instructions. Pack what's left, but don't bother with the heavy antiques. They're already spoken for. The donation center arrived an hour later. 2 women and a van. They smiled when they saw the furniture. Real wood, one of them said, running a hand across the sideboard. They don't make it like this anymore. I nodded. It's yours. She tilted her head. You sure? Absolutely. It's been behind glass my whole life. Let it mean something to someone. They thanked me. Took everything, the china cabinet, the velvet chairs, even the grandfather clock my father used to wind every Sunday like some ritual of importance. By noon, the place was stripped, bare bones. I walked through each room, flipping off lights for the last time, kitchen, den, study. The master bedroom, my parents' domain, felt the strangest. The bed gone, the walls echoing. But I didn't linger. I had one more task. Utilities. I canceled everything. Gas, electric, cable. The water I scheduled to shut off at 5 p.m., the day they were due to return. I knew they'd take a cab from the airport. I knew they'd expect the porch light to be on, the door unlocked, their house waiting. I made sure none of that would happen. I should tell you, I almost wavered. That morning, the day of their return, I sat in a cafe downtown with a lavender latte and a lump in my throat. My phone buzzed. It was a photo. My mother, beaming in a sun hat, her arm linked with my father's. Behind them, the cliffs of Santorini glowed in gold light. The message read, "See you tonight, darling. We brought you something special." I stared at the image for a long time. They looked happy, innocent even, like they hadn't done anything wrong. But that's the thing about betrayal. The betrayer never feels the cut. Only the betrayed does. So I didn't reply. Instead, I went back to the house one last time. I put their mail in a manila envelope, left it with the concierge at their condo downtown, the one they'd used as a pied-à-terre when I first moved back in. I placed a key inside too, the key to their next home, a 940-square-foot two-bedroom rental with a view of the alley and no elevator. I'd paid 6 months in advance, left a note with the building manager. "They'll be confused at first," I told him. "Just smile, hand them the welcome folder, and be polite even if they're not." He nodded. "You're nicer than me." They landed around 7 p.m. I knew, because Elaine called me at 7:41. The message was loud, her voice strained, controlled. "Clarissa, what the hell is going on? Mom and Dad got to the house and it's sold and empty? What did you do? Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I drove to the harbor. It was dusk, violet skies, cold air, and salt in the wind. I parked 2 blocks from the house where you could still see the roofline over the hedge. I didn't want to be too close, but I needed to see them arrive. At 8:07, the taxi pulled up. My mother stepped out first. Her suitcase had a dangling Amalfi luggage tag. My father followed, grunting as he hoisted his carry-on. They both turned toward the front door and froze. The porch light was off, the door locked. A bold red sold sign stood in the grass like a monument. They stared at it. My mother walked to the door, knocked, then tried the handle. Nothing. My father pulled out his phone. I watched him tap the screen, fumble. He didn't know who to call, and then slowly they turned. They saw me. I stepped forward, calm, collected. My mother's mouth fell open. "Clarissa?" she breathed. I nodded. "Welcome home." "What is this?" my father barked. "What the hell is going on?" "You said the deed change was for taxes," I said, "so I figured I'd help with financial planning." His face flushed crimson. "You sold the house?" I nodded again. "And donated the furniture. Utilities are off. You've been moved into the condo, 6 months paid in advance. You'll need a new kettle." My mother shook her head. "You can't do this." "I already did." "Elaine will fix this," she snapped. "She has friends in real estate. She knows people." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folder. "Emails," I said, "including one where you gave full consent to the deed transfer. Neha made sure we dotted every I. Elaine reviewed it too. She called it cleaner this way." That silenced them. My father looked like he'd been punched. My mother sat on the front step, her hands trembling. And that's when the real twist landed. Elaine pulled up. She parked haphazardly, half on the curb, and marched over. "This is insane," she snapped. "You're out of your mind." I didn't flinch. "You knew about the transfer. You advised it." "That was before you went full sociopath." "No," I said, stepping closer. "It was before you got outplayed." She glared at me. "You think this makes you powerful. What are you even trying to prove?" I smiled. "That you don't get to erase people without consequences." My father was pacing the lawn like a caged animal. The sold sign stood bright against the twilight, its bold red letters slicing through the gray-blue dusk like a verdict. The wind off the water had picked up. My mother sat hunched on the cold concrete steps, her cashmere wrap drawn tight around her shoulders like it might shield her from what she was finally beginning to understand. I didn't rush. I wanted them to feel every second of it. I walked slowly from the curb, each step measured, heels clicking softly against the brick path my father had once paid a mason to install, said it gave the house gravitas. Now it was just a walkway to someone else's front door. When I reached them, I stopped 3 feet away, close enough to look them in the eyes, far enough to remind them that I was no longer standing with them, They both stared at me like I was a stranger. I smiled. Cool. Unapologetic. You said it was just paperwork, I said, so I filed some. My mother blinked. You've misunderstood. No, I interrupted. You counted on me not understanding. That's different. My father took a step forward. You had no right. I had the deed. You tricked us. I raised an eyebrow. I had Neha explain every line before you signed. You didn't ask a single question. You just handed it over, thinking I'd never use it. My mother stood then, slow, like her bones couldn't quite bear the weight of what was happening. We gave you everything, she whispered. And this is how you repay us? The audacity. Everything? I exhaled, steadying myself before the storm inside me could take over. This was not the moment to yell. This was the moment to let the facts speak. Something they'd never respected, but couldn't deny. I pulled a folder from my tote bag. Thick, neatly labeled. This, I said, is a copy of the email chain from Elaine's office, time-stamped, documented, with her approval on the property transfer. Attached are your signatures, your tax filings, and a note from Dad explicitly stating, quote, remove her name to simplify the process. We'll add her back later. I met his gaze. You never intended to. My father didn't respond. He looked past me, at the house, at what used to be his empire. My mother, on the other hand, found her voice. This is your family, Clarissa. What kind of daughter does this? That made me laugh. A bitter, short sound. The kind who got erased, I said. The kind who watched you fawn over Elaine's every whim while treating me like a house guest in my own home. The kind who spent 3 years paying your property taxes while Elaine got her second honeymoon in Milan. They went still. Ah, they hadn't thought I knew. You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't see the renovation loan you quietly took out in my name? The way you moved money around like it was Monopoly? I was your contingency plan. A backup name to keep the lights on while you played favorites. Elaine deserved that support, my mother hissed. She has real responsibilities. She's an influencer who sells collagen gummies and preaches about gut health in a $2,000 robe she billed to your American Express. My father flinched. Oh, he knew. I let that silence settle. Let it sting. You used me. But here's the thing. I let you. I kept quiet. I believed deep down that I had a place here, that someday you'd look at me and see me. I looked at the house, the warm glow from the new owner's kitchen window. But that day never came. They threatened to sue next, of course. It came out in stutters, fury, a last gasp of control. My father waved his phone like it was a weapon. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. This isn't over. We'll take this all the way. I didn't even blink. Please do, I said, calm as glass. The documents are airtight. I have recordings, receipts, and every correspondence archived twice. I even had Neha's paralegal review your living trust. Guess what? It's void. You moved too many assets without reporting them. The IRS might be interested. He went pale. The storm passed from him into my mother. You are cruel, she spat. You've destroyed your own family. No, I said, my voice low. You destroyed it when you took my name off that deed and didn't think I'd notice. You destroyed it when you told people I was just helping out around the house, like I was the maid, not your daughter. You destroyed it every time you let Elaine speak for you. And right on cue, Elaine. She arrived in a flurry of perfume, crocodile boots, and righteous fury. Her Range Rover screeched into the curb like a final act in a bad play. Clarissa, she shrieked, slamming the door. I am done with your little mental health revenge arc. You need serious help. I laughed again, this time full-bodied, unapologetic. "You're late," I said. She strode up to me, eyes blazing. "Do you really think anyone is going to side with you in this mess?" I looked at her. Really looked. A woman who'd always been shiny, loud, and so very hollow. "Not anyone," I said. "Just the people who matter." I turned back to my parents. "You have a condo, a clean space, paid for. You're not homeless, you're just humbled. You'll be fine, maybe even better off." Elaine scoffed. "You're delusional." "No," I said, walking away. "I'm free." As I reached my car, I heard my mother call out, "Clarissa, wait." I paused. For a second, I thought maybe something real would come out of her mouth. A crack in the wall, an apology. But all she said was, "What are we supposed to tell people?" I smiled without turning around. "Tell them the truth." Then I drove away. I didn't buy another house right away. People expected that. Expected me to take the money and run straight into some sleek penthouse overlooking Cole Harbor, where I'd sip champagne from a flute and smirk at the skyline like I'd won a game. But this wasn't a game. It never had been. I wasn't chasing luxury. I was building something no one could take from me again. So I moved into a modest rental for a while. 1 bedroom, creaky floorboards, but a sun-drenched kitchen and a garden I could actually dig my hands into. I planted rosemary and lavender and let silence be my roommate for a while. That house sale had closed at $4.3 million. After legal fees, taxes, and settling what little debt my parents had left tangled in the paperwork, I walked away with just over $3.2 million in my account. $3.2 million. Enough to start over. But more than that, enough to change something. It started with an email. A woman named Ruth, mid-50s, had been pushed out of her mother's will after taking care of her through the last stages of dementia. Her brother, the golden boy, inherited the house, sold it, and never spoke to her again. She found me through a blog post I wrote, just to process everything. She ended the email with, "I thought I was alone until I read your story." Then came more. Clara, Janine, Tara, women from all over. Financially smart, emotionally devastated. Cut out of family wealth not because they weren't good enough, but because they weren't easy enough, not quiet enough, not grateful enough, not pliable. So I did something with that money. I called Neha and said, "Let's build something real." And we did. We bought a 5-unit building in East Vancouver, renovated every inch of it with local female-owned contractors, created affordable, dignified housing for women restarting after family betrayal, whether it was divorce, disinheritance, or just decades of emotional servitude that finally broke them. We called it Harbor House. Each unit was named after the women in my family who came before the erasure. My grandmother, my great-aunt, and even my godmother who died with a shoebox full of uncashed IOUs from family she never said no to. At the opening, I stood under a string of warm lights, holding a mug of tea, and looked out at a courtyard full of laughter. Children playing, women trading soup recipes, a therapist on site 3 days a week, and a shared garden where tomatoes were ripening in the sun. That was the house I'd always needed. Not just walls and windows, but safety, dignity, choice. The one Sunday, Neha came by for tea. We sat on my new porch, a cozy little spot in Kitsilano I'd eventually bought outright in cash, just 2 blocks from the beach. Nothing flashy, but every detail was mine. The green door, the lemon tree in a ceramic pot, the bamboo wind chime that clinked like laughter. She opened her laptop with a grin. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. It was an article. Financial Justice, One House at a Time. How Clarissa Lee Turned Betrayal into a Blueprint. There was a photo of me from the Harbor House ribbon cutting. Wind in my hair, arms crossed, smiling like a woman who had nothing left to prove. I sipped my tea and laughed softly. I guess I'm not just the cautionary tale anymore. Neha nudged me. You never were. You were just the only one who saw the storm coming and built a roof before it hit. We sat in that golden silence for a while. Then I said something I hadn't said aloud before. I'm proud of myself. Not bitter. Not smug. Just true. My parents still send Christmas cards, mostly blank inside. A name. A signature. No apologies. And I send one back. A card printed by the women at Harbor House with a quote on the front that says, "Sometimes the family you build is safer than the one you were born into." If you enjoyed this story and you felt seen or inspired or even just satisfied by how it ended, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts or your own story, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about women taking back what's rightfully theirs, with grace, grit, and just a little bit of fire. Because remember, they can take your name off the deed, but they can't take your worth. Thanks for listening.